Dear students, so welcome back to Property Law, HOE 6011. And well, we've been talking about sales, mortgage, lease, and exchange. So those got over, and now we look at gifts. And then I'll talk about homework 4. So, well, should have quite an eventful coming weeks, a couple of coming weeks soon. So, what was there last time? Exchanges done. Yeah, homework 3 is coming up, the deadline, and I made some um, alterations so that you can see what it's all about. Homework 3 is regarding the Nemo-DAT principle, and since some of you asked me about it, well, it's not in the notes, so you have to find it yourself and use sources and quote sources and cite sources and things like that. Yeah, should not be difficult. It's quite straightforward. It's a very interesting and important principle. So I hope you learn a bit about it as well. Quite commonsensical, but still, nonetheless, homework. Yeah. So now we're looking at gifts, and gifts would be the last part, and then of course come wills, and then lecture on sales, mortgage, exchange, lease, gifts, and wills will then end. And once that's over, then we can go through the law of neighbors and some other important aspects about property law. So, what's a gift? Well, we all get gifts and we all like gifts. Now, just remember whatever we are talking about over here is not purely just a definition of what is a gift or things like that. You should also keep in mind the taxation angle. All right, so let's say it's your 25th birthday, and now your grandmother wants to gift her flat to you. Yeah, so you have to, well, look at the pros and cons over here, of course. Well, it may be that yeah, she could sell it to you. If she sells it to you, of course, there'll be a different tax for that. But if she gifts it to you, would there still be some tax implications over here? Of course, you can't just go around gifting things to people. For example, you can't gift a car to me. There has to be some reason. Not always, but the tax people, they always want to see a reason. Why would a student gift a car to her teacher or lecturer or professor? And in the same way, when you deal with such gifts, you have to sort of understand, of course, there are these sentiments that are involved. Yeah, it's a quite a strange feeling to be the object of somebody's affection and to get a gift. We all like gifts, but sometimes you have to look the gift horse in the mouth, and that's a sort of a English phrase. Basically, um, well, it's like this. I gifted a box of chocolates to Professor Thomas Hoffman once, and when he noticed that they were past the expiry date, he sort of understood why I was gifting them to him. Yeah, of course, a couple of months here or there won't kill anybody, hopefully. But you see, a gift can not always be just something nice and fluffy and something pleasurable. It could also have consequences. So we are looking at gifts today in a legal sense and looking at the definition of it. When is a gift done? When is it complete? Can a gift be rescinded or cancelled? Can you take back your gifted object? If you are given multiple gifts at the same time, can you cherry pick and choose which gift you like and which you don't like? And pros and cons to all of these things purely from a legal viewpoint. But of course, because all of you are from different countries, well, many of you are, and so in that case, I would advise you also to keep in mind that there is also a taxation angle to everything, and law is no exception to that. So a gift is a transfer of certain existing movable or immovable property. Yeah, so it has to be certain, it has to be existing. The gift has to be made voluntarily and without consideration, of course. If I gift to you €1 million and you gift to me your house, yeah, that's not a gift, all right? That's not even an exchange. That would be a sale. Then, of course, the donor is the one who gives, and donee is the one who gets it. And of course, the gift has to be accepted by or on behalf of the donee. If it's not accepted, then I can gift you whatever, but if you don't accept my gift, then it's not a complete transaction. So acceptance, of course, has to be made during the lifetime of the donor, and when she is still capable of giving, which means mental capacity, physical capacity. And if the donee dies before acceptance, the gift is void. All right. So these are some very very basic criteria. Again, how relevant are they would be dependent upon which legal system you are in, the jurisdiction, your country, and how gifts are normally looked at. In some countries, under the property laws, respective property laws, you could have a very strict definition of what is a sale, what is a mortgage, what is a gift, what is an exchange, and sometimes these definitions can be a bit fluid. So, well, how it works out eventually is, of course, dependent on the legal situation. But these are some very, very general terms that we are looking at today. So, when can a gift be suspended or revoked? If you agree on that on the happening of a specified event, something that could trigger the suspension or the revocation of the gift, then yes, a gift can be revoked or suspended. But again, all of this comes under the law of obligations or contractual laws. And so again, too many ifs and buts and a lot of gray zone can arise sometimes. But of course, if I gift something to you and I say that if I don't like you or for whatever reason I can always take my gift back, then it's not really a gift in the legal sense. All right. So again, taxation aspects, and then gifts, whether you can suspend them or revoke them. And then there is this concept of onerous gifts. What would that mean? Let's say I gift you a car, a flat, and a horse with 3 broken legs. Yeah. So now, well, the car is nice. It's a bit old, and so it may have high consumption of petrol. And then, of course, many countries have laws regarding how old a car can be from a pollution perspective. So again, it's not the best gift, but yeah, it's a gift. The house or a flat, well, that's always nice to have. And then a horse, yeah, with 3 broken legs. Now, what the hell would you do with a horse with 3 broken legs? But the issue here is that this is a single transfer. You've got all 3 of them together. So it's either you take them all or you get none. All right. You can't cherry pick and say, I just want one. I don't want the other things. I just want the horse and the old car. No, you have to take everything. So again, well, there are some examples over here from share perspective, company shares or things like that. So this was quite straightforward and simple. Yeah. But now, if you were to look, for example, in the Moodle notes, besides the lectures, we can also see some articles and news reports and things. So something very pertinent from our point of view is the engagement ring as a gift. And I remember reading about this. There was this actress or singer, Mariah Carey, and she got this gigantic rock diamond from her fiance, and this was an engagement ring, and there was this big party, and so a man gifts €1 million engagement ring to his fiance because she's his princess and going to become the queen and all that stuff. But all good things must come to an end, and very often, well, the engagement doesn't go beyond that stage to a marriage. And of course, well, now you have an issue here. So basically, she said she doesn't want to get married. The engagement is off. Okay. And so the guy said, "Well, can I get my ring back?" And she said, "No." Now you see, now this is where the problem starts, because uh, the man is not getting either the wife or the ring. And so there are some issues here, of course, very deep issues, depending on whether you are a woman or a man. Yeah, but again, this is quite an interesting aspect. Now we all know about prenuptial agreements. We all know about what a marriage means, and all the tax implications, and all the issues that come with a divorce and all of those things. But now we're not even talking about any paperwork, any contract or anything. Well, this is just a engagement ring, an engagement ring. Now you could say that a promise to get married is also a contract. Good luck trying to enforce that. So there is this article that I found. It's again, not an academic source, of course. It's just some law website. Some American law firm has put up some things here. So again, very interesting. Well, you say in the law field there are two types of people. One would be the lawyers. Lawyers are people who practice law and stuff. So they are dealing with cases and courts and all the relevant things that happen in real life. And then there are researchers, and legal researchers will, they call themselves scientists, and so social scientists, and so they look at different legal aspects, and what theory fits in, and what are the principles, and highbrow fancy stuff which has no real legal implications. For example, artificial intelligence and what can it mean. That's all theoretical. All right. Doesn't mean anything right now in a court of law. So again, liability aspects, insurance issues, or all of those things that you go with regarding artificial intelligence or cyber security. Well, all of these are, of course, very good research topics, but what actually can you do in a court of law is what a group of people in the field, the lawyers, are more concerned with. So this article about what happens to the engagement ring in a broken engagement, you need to sort of see it in that sense. First of all, of course, it's an American journal article, law article, so it's very oriented towards American laws. Number one. Number two, of course, it's not a scientifically researched article. It's just a bunch of lawyers putting together their different experiences in this field. So engagement ring as a conditional gift. First of all, engagement ring as a gift. Yeah, is it a gift? Secondly, as a conditional gift. Now you may recollect some of these aspects that we discussed under transfer of property, different sort of rules. Engagement ring as a compensation, and of course contractual law situations that come up over here. So again, a lot of interesting issues. Again, very light and fluffy, but end of the day, well, a ring could be an expensive piece of rock, and so this fits in very nicely with our issue of gifts and what are gifts all about. So now that this is all done, maybe I could just talk a bit about this article, European Union law and mortgage possession cases. This is just to sort of remind you that what we discussed in mortgages, well, there are, of course, European Union directives and regulations which could indirectly affect mortgages, and so this is one of these. It's more about fairness and consumer protection and things. So something to read. Now comes a very interesting part, drafting a will. All right. I started this last year, and I was really surprised. I really have to admit, I was a bit anxious. I didn't know how students would take to it. But I was shocked. 90% or more of the students really got into it and really made an amazing job. And I was like so impressed by it. I really didn't expect it. But anyways, wills. Yeah. So here's a full section on wills, and now again, as I said, many of you are from different countries. So I can't just say draft a will, because there could be different arrangements, requirements under Estonian law, Finnish law, Turkish law, I don't know, wherever you're from. Some Erasmus students, French law, Spanish law. So outside the EU, whatever. All right. So it really doesn't help in that sense, because I'll just end up getting 50 different types of wills, and I have no way of cross checking or figuring out anything. So let's do it this way. All right. We look at UK law, or other English law. And so there is this Wills Act of 1837. Yeah, that's the act which applies when you're drafting a will. Now you may ask, why is it so old? Well, um, many countries have a long history, continuous history. They didn't get invaded. They didn't have, you know, crazy changes or things like that. They didn't get absorbed into some bigger country or empire or anything. So England, UK is one of those countries. All right. Same way, you would see with Spain, Portugal, France, to a certain degree. There has been a lot of certainty there. Austria, again, some changes, of course, over a period of time. But Sweden, they really haven't undergone any drastic changes in the last 200 years or so. Switzerland also, as an example. So we look at English law. We look at the Act, the Wills Act of 1837. All right. So as a part of this homework, you have to first of all read the Act, because this homework is about your client, your aunt, based in London. All right. Then there are some very interesting articles I've put up here. Wills and estate planning, yeah, how the planning goes, how to be an executor. These are very important elements. There's an administrator, there's the testator, the person who draws the will, the person who makes the will, the beneficiaries. So these are all very specific terms that are referred to over here. Um, and so there are some very important elements that come up. Number one would be, now of course, a lot of this may have a bit of an overlap with family law, but what we're looking at over here is purely from a property law perspective, that you have to draft a will. All right. So we're just trying to take into account all of the rules and ideas and principles that we have spoken about in the past. This is a transfer of property. All right. And so in that sense, it is relevant for our course. So there's also this issue of how to deal with an estate. So what is an estate and what does it mean? So some of these are things that will just set the tone, lay out the approaches. Again, very simplistic. The whole outlook is just to sort of help you understand what the whole will drafting process is. Then there are what makes a will invalid in the UK. What are the reasons? Very important, because very often people make mistakes, and they don't realize some things can not be allowed under the law. So that's also here. And then there are templates, and again, glossary or list of words. Yeah, so there's an administrator, attestation, beneficiary, there is a will, there is a codicil, there is an executor, all of these different concepts that come up. And so the process is quite straightforward. And again, lots of different, how would you say, templates, so that you can choose from them. Some of it is just poetry, what should be the title and what should be the ending, who should sign the will, of course, who should be the executor, who should be the witnesses to the will. And all of these are very interesting areas to take into account. And so based on this, at the end, you have to draft a will. And well, it's a coronavirus pandemic time, and it's been quite rough for a lot of people, and as students especially, facing uncertain futures. Nobody knows what's happening the next year or two. Internships are hung, and everything is upside down. So in this, I'm offering you a sort of a silver lining, a bright patch of sunshine in your otherwise sad, gloomy lives. So So, well, let's just say that if your parents or somebody asks you, like, all right, what the hell, you've been going to Caltech law school and you've been learning law, what have you studied? Tell me something specific. So then you can proudly say that you have learned how to make a will under English law for whoever wants it to be done so. Now, of course, when you look at wills, it's quite an interesting topic, because not all wills need witnesses in a certain format. Again, different countries have different rules. Do wills have to be registered? Who do they have to be registered before? Do they have to be notarized? Again, a lot of different rules over here. And what's interesting is you can have a soldier's will or a sailor's will, and this is again very strange. It's like, you can have a written will and unwritten will. Some of these are, of course, dependent on issues, like, for example, during the war, a soldier is dying, and suddenly the soldier is like 25 years old and now is dying. And of course, many soldiers don't think in terms of, or many people, young people, don't think in terms of making a will. All right. Now, why would you make a will? As we saw in the lecture notes, you make a will because you want to control how your property goes after your death. Yeah? You, as in the client. And well, if you don't make a will, doesn't matter. The law will decide that everything goes to your brothers and sisters and children or whoever are there. Now, maybe you don't want things to go to your brother or sister. Maybe you want it to go to your grandmother. Would that be a good idea? I don't know. Yeah, because chances are she's older than you. The same also again then goes. So that's why, you would want to draft a will. And in some countries, the law stipulates that there are the rules for drafting wills, just like in England. But in certain situations, maybe you're on a ship, the ship is sinking, or you're in the army or whatever, then you can have a different sort of rule. But otherwise, the rules are for normal situations. You're in a country or in the city, life is normal and nothing extraordinary, and you want to make a will. And then again, there are different aspects about the will after the death, how the will is acted upon, how the courts decide. So this is a huge topic by itself. And again, a lot of overlap with family law, but we don't go into family law. That's not what I'm teaching. So this is quite straightforward and simple. You have to make a will, a simple will, um, keeping into account all the relevant aspects, and you don't mess it up. So that's how it is. And of course, you can be as creative as you want, and your rich aunt Matilda could be, whatever. So draft a will based on English law for your imaginary rich aunt Matilda who lives in London, and use the notes to sort of understand how this goes. All right. Yeah, straightforward and simple. 25 days, 26, 24, depending on when you see the video. So keep that in mind, and have fun. All right. No restrictions, no limitations. Now, just be careful, of course. There were some students who were, saying that their rich aunt Matilda leaves everything to them, which may not always be appropriate. Yeah, this is something that I had learned when I was in law school, and it talks about conflict of interest. And basically, a lawyer should not represent his or her family, yeah, because it sort of messes things up a bit. Or if you are representing, and as in this case, you just have to be very careful and realize that you shouldn't take advantage of your rich aunt Matilda, and just try to grab all her property and put it in your name. So again, a lot of these things come in over here. So to be neutral and safe, you can always just say that it's a will, and you're helping her. She's a client, and so these are her instructions, and based on this and your understanding of English law, this is how it would play out. All right, so that's good. That's done. We have dealt with quite a lot of things so far. Yeah, property law has been ongoing. Now, of course, lots of homework, 5 homework assignments, but yeah, I hope it's been fun. So now we look at lecture 4, and of course, sorry, that's here in the notes, but this is the law of neighbors. All right. If you look in Moodle, this is what it would cover. There were some other areas as well. Common Heritage of Mankind. So I've put that up. This was something by Professor Catherine Nyman Metcalf. You can just read it, but it's not for the exam. In fact, you'll see a lot of stuff that I've put up, the notes and everything. Some of them specifically indicate they're not for exam, so that there's no confusion as such. Of course, the exam will be an open book exam. So we have the exam dates already, right? 19th May, 26th May, and 2nd June. Yeah. So that's here. Yeah. And then of course there were some other things regarding land rights and minority rights, post conflict property issues. There used to be this American lawyer living with his Finnish wife in Holland. Yeah. And then he used to deal with all this stuff in the former Yugoslavia, and then Libya and Afghanistan. So different things, but we don't really want to go too much into all this because this is a 3 credit simple course. So now we just deal with the law of neighbors, and we try to understand different elements that are relevant over here. And of course, if some things don't make sense, you can always ask me a question or post a question on the online forum in Moodle for the course, so that everybody else can also be aware if anything is required. So law of neighbors. All right, we all have neighbors. Something I read long time ago is no man is an island. And again, it was so long ago that everything used to be male specific that time. So of course, no woman is an island also. Yeah. But what this also plays in nicely is that man is a social animal, or human beings are social animals. All right. So we live together. We sort of have neighbors, and so we have our differences of opinions, and then of course you can also have problems that arise. So we'll be looking at 3 main areas. One is servitudes, the second is nuisances, and then a third is how to deal with surface water. But really, I mean, I know many people who have conflicts. For example, your neighbor is you are at home trying to study or work, and your neighbor is next door and noisy, and make drilling a hole in the wall. Or your neighbor has a dog, and the dog keeps on barking all the time, and spoiling certain parts of the house walls or corridors and things. So properties, are bounded by properties of other persons, and of course, well, you can always have different issues that arise in this case. Now, it could be a city scenario, urban scenario, or a rural scenario, and of course, these could all have different elements to them. So, for example, let's say I could maybe draw this out for you. All right, so this is something I often do here, and so let's say this is a person's house. Yeah. All right, and this is the land, the garden around the house. Yeah. Okay, but now it turns out that this is the main road. It's a bit far, and so to get to the main road, A has to go through the land of B. All right, you see that over here. So to get to the main road, A has to pass through the land of B. All right, and then so this is of course how a lot of conflicts can arise. Or it could also be something as simple as utilities. So electricity connection has to come from the main road side where all the electric lines are, through somebody's property, and then go over to your property or your client's property. And then of course, in a rural area, this could be just between 1 or 2 neighbors, because land holdings are huge, and people have more space, and the population is less. But in a city, people are more interdependent. You have houses very close to each other. You have pipes, wiring, cables, all going through everybody's properties and things. And so, of course, there's a lot of scope for a lot of conflict that can arise in a lot of these situations. Now, when we look at something like this, A is, of course, in a certain category, which would be a dominant servitude, and then B is in a different category, and B is in a servient, servitude. Now, what does this mean? Basically, A has the right to legally go through B's property. Is this trespass? No. Why? Because A has a fundamental right to access to public utilities, and just because it happens to be, through a part of B's property, B cannot really prevent A from exercising certain rights. And these are, of course, how a lot of conflicts can arise. So for example, it's the pandemic time and nobody wants to live in a city anymore. So you see this really nice, cozy, secluded place in the hillside, somewhere in the countryside, in the forest or something, and then you really like it. And of course, the price is also very cheap, and so it looks very nice. All right. Now, why is the price cheap? Because of its location. Yeah, it's out of the grid. It's somewhere, not easily accessible. Now, what does that mean? Well, what that means is basically to get to that property, you have to go through the properties of other people. Some may be public properties, some may be private properties, and so often a lot of disputes that come up are regarding the fact that to get to my land, I have to go through B's land, and B says no. In that case, what do you do? Well, the law stipulates that you can enter into an arrangement or a law of obligations type of scenario with B. If B doesn't agree, then of course you can go to court and say, hey, I have a right, and you can't expect me to buy a helicopter to go from here to here because I have to go through somebody else's land. And then the court may indicate, all right, well, in that case you have to pay so much every year as rent or whatever. So a lot of these issues can become quite complicated and cause a lot of tension. So we're looking at different legal doctrines over here, and of course, law of adverse possession, for example. Then there's the public law of zoning and planning. Then there's servitudes. Then the law of nuisance, law of surface waters. So we look at all of these scenarios and then try to understand how the law operates and in what categories. All right. But this is something that happens all the time. You have all these conflicts. In Estonia, it's just like in the US, for example, it's quite common. Let's say somebody has a beachfront property. Yeah, it's not on the beach, but it's next to the beach, and the beach is a public place. Yeah, there's a road and people want to go from the road to the beach, but to go through that they have to pass through your property. All right. Now this road existed a long time ago. The beach has existed for millions of years. People have been going all the time, but now you have built a house and you don't like to see people walking through your garden going to the beach. But that's the traditional route of access. Yeah. If you block out these routes of access, then basically nobody can come to the beach. So you become the owner, the de facto owner of the beach, and that's not acceptable at all. So a lot of these conflicts arise. In California, you have a lot of these software millionaires, billionaires, and so they try to do all these sort of things, and of course, it's very upsetting. Then you also sometimes read about the Facebook guy, Mark Zuckerberg, or Bill Gates or somebody, and Steve Jobs, when he was alive. And a lot of them have these crazy requirements for privacy. And so they want to have high walls, or they want to grow tall trees and things. And of course, that blocks the views of other neighbors. So you have a lot of these issues that arise, which need to be looked into. So we look at servitudes first. And so servitudes, this would be like the classic example of this: subjection of one person to another person. Yeah. So basically, it's the use and utility of another estate belonging to another proprietor. And so a servitude is a right of some benefit or beneficial use out of, in, or over the land of another. All right. So that's the key aspect over here. To enjoy your property rights, you have to trespass or infringe on the property rights of others. Now, of course, this could be quite complicated, and the easy way to say is, all right, okay, A needs to go to the main road, so B should allow A to go on the main road. What's the big deal? How much can it be? How inconvenient can it be? It's just A has a car, and that's it. But these are not how things are. This may be a family. A may have children, A may have 3 cars. Now, what if A decides to have a big party on his 50th birthday and invites 50 guests? So now you have 50 cars or 25 cars coming over here. So you say this is where the problems arise. So although it's about A and B, A's property and B's property, it doesn't just mean that only these two are the people concerned. So when you have a lot of traffic, for example, or a lot of usage of the land, which is not normal, then in that case, of course, conflicts can arise. So as long as A has a house here and B has this land around, and so A needs the access road across B's land to go to the main road, so that's okay, fine. But what if A decides to convert his house into a hotel or a restaurant? Yeah, you see, again, a lot of these issues that arise have implications under the law of servitudes. So we can look at, for example, the French Civil Code. Again, one of the older examples. It sort of gives you certain ideas about how servitudes work. And so servitudes basically have three main rules or functions. One is affirmative, which is to use land that you do not own or possess. All right. This could be different things. Like for example, I got this piece of land and I got the house. Yeah, built the house and things. But before doing that, I needed access to electricity. And so, well, of course, now this doesn't depend on me. It depends on where the electricity transponder is, yeah, or that big transmitter box is. And well, sometimes if you are in a far off location off the grid, then taking that electric connection from that transmitter box all the way to your house, could cost a lot of money. Sometimes it can cost like 100,000 euros or something. Well, in my case, it had to come from the pole where it was up to the boundary of my land, and it cost me 6,000 euros, and then the distance was like maybe 3 meters or something. Yeah, so of course, this is quite upsetting sometimes, but this was relatively still cheap. So can you imagine, just 3 meters and it's 6,000 euros? But a bigger problem was that this 3 meters was not my property, it was somebody else's property. So now the electricity company, me, and my neighbor then had to go to the notary and then had to sort of agree that the neighbors allow the electricity company to dig a little trench through their 3 meters so that the cable can go up to my property. Yeah. And then from there, I had to, of course, draw it out another 100 meters to come to my house. But I mean, that's in a rural area. So of course, as you can see here, this is affirmative use of land here, which I do not own or possess. Servitudes can also restrict neighbors' use of their land. As I said, for example, in residential developments, just because your neighbor wants to have privacy or whatever, privacy, so they decide to have a super high 20-meter wall or something, of course you can say, what the hell, this is not acceptable. So you can restrict. So that's a restrictive aspect of a servitude. And of course, it's an affirmative obligation under which you can impose an obligation on your neighbors. So you can have an association and you say that, okay, we all live together, so we all have to, paint our walls white, or, have security guards or pay a security company or whatever. So everybody contributes so much for the cleaning or, taking care of premises or things like that. So these are the three main examples of servitudes, functions rather. So let's stop here for today. You have quite a lot on your hands, and we continue again next week. All right. So until then, thank you and goodbye.